Welcome to the Scariest Things podcast, your gateway to the trends and tropes of the horror genre. Today, live from the Rose City Comicon in our hometown of Portland, Oregon. I'm your host, Eric Lee, and I'm joined, as always, by my cohort,
Mike Campbell.
And today we have a super special guest, and super being the apropos term because we're in a comic convention, David Dastmalchian, who I think many of you may not know his name, but if you're covered in geek sauce like we are, he is one of the preeminent that guy actors who's had some supporting roles in some of the most famous movies that you'll run into. He was in the first role was in The Dark Knight.
Yes.
And he was in Ant-Man and Blade Runner 2049.
That's true.
And he's going to be your Polka Dot Man in Suicide Squad 2.
I don't know if that's been confirmed. Have they put that news out?
It's on the internet, that's...
I believe so.
We'll see.
That's as good as confirmed. You'll get a paycheck at some point.
If we need to scrub that from the podcast, your agent can talk to us. And it sounds like you're going to be in the upcoming Dune movie. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
So
I know that is confirmed. That is 100%.
Okay.
And who I'm playing has been confirmed as well.
Yeah.
I think the other show has lots of fun sleight of hands happening, but we'll see what happens.
Well, if I go into DC and I look up Polka Dot Man, it's got you credited.
That's amazing. That's crazy. I
They're
guess everyone's going to be in for lots of fun and surprises when they go see the movie. But the Dune picture has wrapped anyway, and boy, yes. So I live in. Did you say covered in nerd sauce? Those
Yes.
of us who are, yes, because I am as well since the age of 9, and so conventions always they felt like a really special place for me, like comic shops do and like movie theaters do for people like us. And then we can get into that, but then they didn't for a minute, and now thanks to what's happening in my life now, they are back to being something I'm really excited to attend and to be at. So thanks for having me.
Of course.
I love your show.
Of course.
And I think that talking about horror and the genre and how it lives in film as well as lit is just one of my favorite things to do. So I'm very excited.
Can we start with your foundation? So you've been in a lot of horror adjacent stuff, right?
Yes.
So Eric mentioned Dark Knight. He mentioned you did not mention Twin Peaks.
Twin
Prisoners.
Peaks.
Those are all kind of
is a horror adjacent, a great thriller, psychological, horrific film. Bird Box.
I was going to say Bird Box. Obviously, the Belko Experiment.
The Employer, the Belko Experiment.
The Teacher coming up.
Teacher is horrific.
Yeah. So what was all those things taken together as an amalgam? What informed your horror interest as a child?
So I'm glad you asked that. As an actor, I've been so fortunate, and I've been so fortunate for so many reasons we could list all day. Like because I am a comic book nerd and I'm a big fan of the sci-fi and superhero genres. Being a part of so many iconic and huge, amazing productions has been a dream for me. But the thing about being an actor, which I love telling stories, and I love making people feel less alone through story, and I love connecting with people through story, and the ability to do that through characters that live on the edge and that are in the darker shadows of society has been a really fun and challenging and sometimes strenuous but always rewarding experience since I started on stage.
Right.
So I started on stage, and my inspiration to become an actor and to find characters to explore and to flesh out and to take beyond the level of mustache twirling cliche was born in my absolute admiration for actors like Lon Chaney.
Right.
Oh,
right.
Nice.
His son as
Yes.
well.
Yeah.
But definitely Lon Chaney. Boris Karloff.
Right.
Some of the makeup master actors from the golden age of the Universal and the Hammer films.
Yep.
And the way that all began for me as a young boy in Kansas. I grew up in the suburbs of Kansas City, and I was in a fairly religious household. And I would sneak downstairs. I had seen during the Saturday Monster Matinee, which were more of like the Godzilla films, the previews or the teasers for the Crematia's Friday Nightmare, which was our local horror host.
What was the name of your local horror host?
So our local horror host was Crematia Mortem, and Crematia's Friday Nightmare was on way past my bedtime on Friday nights. And just like Dr. Demento,
right,
I figured out that I could wait till the rest of the house was asleep, and I would sneak downstairs, and I would get to the basement, which is where we had our big old fashioned television,
right,
and tune in to TV 41 at 10:30 on Friday nights and watch Crematia's Friday Nightmare. And Crematia was like so many of the tradition of horror hosts. Hilarious,
right,
fun, cool, campy. The set was really neat and very DIY. You know, you could see the strings on the bats. But she loved and adored these films. And she introduced me. One of the first, most, really devastating memories I have is getting so emotionally caught up in Oliver Reed's performance in Curse of the Werewolf and watching that transformation into that monster, and then also seeing when he's being chased through the rooftops and he's hunted and you feel bad for him but you're scared of him, and it was like I was bit. Like,
right,
you're bit by a vampire, you're bit by a werewolf. I was
or
bit.
Oliver Reed.
Or Oliver Reed, and I was hooked. And just one other addition to that, which is I think you guys would find interesting, was I was obsessed with she would have these contests, and I really loved writing from a young age because I got into comics in third grade, and I got seriously into comics by sixth grade, and I loved writing, and she would always have these story contests around Halloween time, and if you won, you'd get free tickets to go to the Edge of Hell haunted house, or you could get a Crematia t-shirt with the Crematia signed RIP card. And I never won. And I would sit waiting for them to announce the winners, and they would read them on air, and I never won, and I was devastated. Well, as you were mentioning my acting career, I was in a film called Prisoners, which came out in 2013, which is a wonderful, incredible film by Denis Villeneuve, and a very horrifying story. And I had been a fan of the Crematia Mortem fan page for years. That show went off the air in probably 90, I think, 91. But I had been a fan of, ever since Facebook started, somebody had started a Crematia fan page. And I sent a message to the person running the fan page at one point and asking for something, and was ultimately connected with Roberta Solomon, who played Crematia Mortem, created that character,
who is still with us to this day,
and lives in Portland. And she said,
Crematia, if you're listening, we would love to have you on the podcast.
Yes, we got to do that.
Yeah, I know.
So she messaged me.
We have an in now.
She said, "Are you the actor that was in?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." And she said, "Oh my gosh, why are you a fan of Cremation?" And I told her the whole story.
Right.
I said, "You're to blame for me being the scary guy in these movies." And we're very good friends. In fact, I'm going to see her today at about 4:00.
Awesome.
Well, this is I think a wonderful segue, because David is here to promote a new comic through our friends and our local heroes here at Dark Horse Comics. And it's Count Crowley, which seems heavily influenced by this. Because my initial take was this was something of a
Black Magic or
Elvira meets Jessica Jones kind of a thing. It's going to be available October the 23rd.
October 23rd.
Meets creepy, meets eerie.
Yes.
I love, by the way, I'm stealing that because the Elvira meets Jessica Jones meets Glow, meets creepy, meets eerie, meets Tales from the Crypt.
Yep.
That's all my target zones.
Right.
That was all I was reaching for. So yes, I'm so excited, and
it's a very, when I read it, it's a very studied mashup, right? Like, because it pulls very prescriptively from all those different elements in such a loving way, and you can see that in the book. And when I read it, I was like, I'm all about this thing.
Thank you.
Tell me how because this is your first comic.
This is you guys. I've been collecting comics. The first comic I bought, I was in third grade. My dad bought it for me, and then that was like spinning rack at a local convenience store kind of situation. And then I realized that by reading in the back of them that I needed to get all these other things. And then I eventually found my comic shop, which I actually was going to the satellite store of the home shop, but the satellite store eventually closed, but the home shop is still open. And when the comic comes out, I'm going to actually get to go back to my hometown and get to buy my comic off the shelf of my hometown shop, which is really cool.
So shout out, what's the comic
Clint's
shop?
Comics in Kansas City. Hello, Sharon. Yeah, sadly, we lost the owner a couple of years ago, Jim Kavanaugh, and it's a little bittersweet that Jim's not going to be able to be at the shop. I was with Jim celebrating the 50th anniversary of the shop several years ago in Kansas City.
Right.
And sadly, tragically, he was killed. There was a robbery at his store, and Jim passed away a couple of years ago. And his wife Sharon took up the mantle, and all of us, a lot of not me because I don't live in Kansas City anymore, but all the people who grew up with the shop have been helping, and it's going to be a really amazing day for me to get to go home. My wife and I are going to fly into Kansas City. I'm going to go right to the shop, and we're going to spend the day there. And I can't wait. I'm really excited.
So how does writing a comic book compare to? Because I know that you did a screenplay for Animals, which got a lot of buzz at South by Southwest and a number of other awards. You seem to be this Renaissance man. Who can
I think that's an understatement.
There you go.
I think that's an understatement.
Thanks. Well, I'll tell you, it's interesting because let's say I got really hardcore into comics when I was about 12, and I always loved eating the donuts.
Right.
And I never imagined making the donuts.
Right.
Like, I never, in my wildest dreams, it was so bizarre to think that I thought, a life in film and television seems never seemed attainable. It has always felt like I was the luckiest guy, that won the lottery when I've gone to work and done what I do. But for some reason, the creation of a comic book was just something. And my friends and I did our own Xerox and staple stuff, but it never seemed like it was in the cards for me as a writer. And I from that time that I was really into Crematia, Mortem, and I started to discover my love of horror, I always did after seeing the Lost Boys and Fright Night and the concept of lore and the mythology of monsters and classic monsters being something that you could cull from the pages of comic books or from horror hosts. I always thought, how cool would it be if there's a superhero or a monster hunter whose cover is a horror host. I mean, it's right there. It's a great place to hide in plain sight, a great place to know and learn about all the things you need to know to kill monsters. And that was the idea from my childhood. And I think that idea is cool, and it's got lots of potential for fun visual storytelling and exciting adventures. But it didn't have... There was nothing about that lit like a fire under my ass, if you will, because anything I've ever written, because writing is so hard for me, I either have to write it or it just won't happen. Right. So then I grew up, and I became an adult who struggled pretty almost fatally with depression and anxiety, and sadly spent many years, instead of treating that properly, dealt with it through addiction, and
which was actually that was covered sort of biographical with animals.
Animals, yeah, very much. And then 17 years ago, I got on the path of mental health wellness and starting to take care of myself, and I got clean and sober, and I started to face and battle all these demons and monsters that I've confronted in my adult life, and and then the idea started to really mean something more to me. Right. And I basically thought, because this character who I started to create, Jerri, by the way, Jerri was originally Jerri with a Y, and it was a man. Right. Back 5 or 6 years ago, when I was starting to really get serious about envisioning these stories. And Jerri had all these adventures and was going to reluctantly get this job because the alcoholism had gotten so bad. The only job Jerri could get, who wanted to be a serious newscaster, was hosting the creature feature. And and then the idea that I was thinking of that would be so cool would be that it would be a television series, because I thought, well, I've got years and years of stories and plots and monsters that would go well with this idea. So when Peter Lenkov, who is one of my bosses on the many different things that I work on, but he is the guy who helped reboot the MacGyver and Hawaii Five-O and Magnum. He also did R.I.P.D. at Dark Horse.
Right.
He heard my idea and he was like, I think this is something. I don't know what it is, but it reminds me of Kolchak the Night Stalker, which is one of my favorite things. He's like, I think we got to do something with this. He's friends with Mike Richardson at Dark Horse.
Yep.
He took the idea to the folks at Dark Horse. They brought me in and they said, how do you feel about a comic book? And I flipped, man. I rocketed to the moon that night. I was like, I'm going to get to write my own
There was
comic.
tears.
There was tears. There were tears. Absolutely.
You landed on the top
tears
floor.
of joy.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's amazing.
And so then they paired me with an incredible editor, Megan Walker, and she taught me, how to approach. Because I'd written screenplay. I've gotten 2 films produced that I wrote, and I've written a couple of plays that were done in reading fashion, and so I understood the mechanics. And as an actor, I've studied and understand the mechanics of screenplays. And isn't it funny that I've got 16 long boxes full of comics, and I've never once cared to research like how you write the script of a comic book. So Megan held my hand and we jumped in, and then she brought me the thing that cracked open the whole sky, which was Lucas Kettner.
Yep.
The artist.
Amazing artist.
He sent his first concept idea of Jerri based on my first script. And I cried. I mean, I did. I really did. It's like staring at something you've been dreaming up for 30 years.
Right.
Looking you in the eye and looking more perfect than you could even imagine.
Yeah, Lucas is. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say this is part of a part of a 4 comic run.
Yes.
So
that was the initial idea too. They said, let's do 4 issues because
Count Crowley,
yep. Reluctant Midnight Monster Hunter, and see where it goes. Let's see how you enjoy it, how the experience goes. See if people respond to the material. There's a lot of factors that are beyond the control of the creative endeavor. It's also like, let's see what happens. But the Dark Horse was willing to take a risk on an untested comic book writer based strictly on my idea and my I had written treatments.
Sure.
I just hadn't written actual comic book scripts yet. That they did that. It's been the most rewarding creative experience of my life the last year. Of working on this, and I've had literally dozens of incredibly rewarding creative experiences in my life. I'm so blessed and lucky that I've gotten to be a part of some really amazing things that are really rewarding. But there's never been something like this for me.
Yeah, for those of you who you can't see the book yet, you will soon.
Yes.
But imagine there's a Bernie Wrightson treatment of Creepshow that was done right when the Creepshow movie came out. This looks like it was culled from the pages
ripped from the pages of
the
Creepshow.
Yeah,
it is
crawled out of the crypt of the Creepshow.
You want to give us a little bit of a rough narrative of
Absolutely.
Of the
Well,
story?
what I wanted when I was envisioning this too was that so in my story, Jerri Bartman, this woman who is a super talented investigative journalist, wants to be on a major network news program. She's incredibly driven, incredibly egotistical.
Trying to break out of Cleveland.
She's trying to she goes from a small town in Missouri and then gets her big break on a network affiliate nightly news program in Cleveland. And when she's there, she's assaulted by the male star of this news network. And when she goes to tell the bosses at the network what's happened to her, they basically accuse her of being an overly ambitious liar and that her drinking is really the cause of her lies. And she ends up back in her hometown where she grew up at a small town station. Her brother is now the manager of the station, and she can't keep her shit together. I mean, her boozing is so bad she can't keep her shit. So her brother is so afraid that she's going to be homeless, to keep her on the payroll, has her put on the makeup and host the Count Crowley show, which has been a hit for their channel for many years. And the guy who plays Count Crowley has mysteriously just stopped showing up for work, and no one can get a hold of him.
Mysteriously.
So she does it because it's her last straw, and she's humiliated, and she has to drink almost an entire fifth just to walk out on that stage, and is a hit. And turns out, though, that Count Crowley had a secret, very important responsibility. He was one of the last appointed monster hunters. Monsters are absolutely real. They live in plain sight. All the mythology that we've been fed about them, they have been in control of spinning this fake news to us. So everything you think you know about the mythology of monsters is a lie. So in the world of Count Crowley, in my comic book, werewolves cannot be stopped by a silver bullet. Vampires cannot be stopped by a wooden stake. In fact, stopping these monsters is much harder than we've ever seen it been done before. And for that purpose, I wanted the monsters, I wanted the world of this to look, move, and feel like a classic Universal or Hammer or even tinges of the William Castle kind of world in there. I wanted you to feel like you were looking at something that like, oh, I know that's what a vampire looks like. That's what but of course, letting it bring something fresh to it. But then we turn all of that on its head when you realize that what you think you know about these creatures is wrong. And in my world too, as I believe is true in the real world, I believe in monsters. And I think you guys do too. I've listened to you enough. Like I know you guys really have more than just a fan fondness for this stuff. I think monsters are real, and what that word means has a lot of different definitions. I turn on the TV sometimes lately, and I feel like the world is populated by monsters. It's being run by monsters. I think there are good monsters,
with orange
and
hair.
I think there are bad monsters. I think that, well, we know that. But I'm well, you know, and so Lucas artistically created something. Sorry, my answers are so long for your questions, but I love being able to talk about this shit.
We're here for you. This
Lucas
is your show.
Freaking gets it, man. He understood that we wanted this to look, move, and feel with all the nostalgia of an eerie comic. Right.
And
a creepy story.
It comes through instantaneously.
But then we're going to subvert all your expectations by hopefully telling a story that will hook you if you're a grown-up or somebody that has any... I don't believe in like messaging writing through my writing. Like I've never tried to like write like this is going to be an addiction drama or this is going to be a depression drama. That's not what I'm trying to do with this, but it gives me something I can sink my teeth into, and I'm thinking about what the metaphorical representation of our first werewolf, which you will encounter in issue 1.
Right. Yep.
Amazingly, Lucas's freaking werewolf is so freaking cool, man. But it gives me something that we can add the texture. And Lucas just got it. It's the most beautiful. You know, I collect Halloween records. I have since I was a teenager. Vinyl records that you listen to for the sound effects because I love the art. I love the actual sounds, and I have about 50 of them that span from the 1950s up into the 80s. And Lucas is, when I'm reading this book, sometimes I feel like that 15-year-old me that was listening to those in the dark. You know.
Oh, yeah. No, I remember when Dark Horse started reproducing or doing Creepy again, which was about 10 plus years ago, something like that. I remember walking in the comic book store and having a Creepy like jump off at the shelf at me. And when I downloaded the PDF file, the advanced PDF file of Count Crowley, I had that same feeling. I was like, it just jumped out at me. Just like that.
And how cool is it for you listening, if you were into horror comics or you just love comics and you love horror, Lucas indulged me and Dark Horse allowed me to. Do you guys remember, if you look at any comics pre-90s, the advertising blocks?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
The back
page, they let me have him create vintage-looking ads.
So cool.
Yeah, it's absolutely
Made me laugh
beautiful.
out loud.
Like you see those ads at the bottom? Monster masks.
The joy buzzer.
The joy buzzer.
The shrimp.
But there's little...
Yeah,
little subtle things.
Well,
yeah.
One of our monsters has orange hair.
Yeah, isn't it amazing?
I
saw that and I flipped. I love it.
It was perfect.
Hey, shifting over to horror films.
Yes.
I have to ask the question.
Yes.
You
My favorite.
In the Belko experiment.
Oh, yes.
No, in the Belko experiment,
Yes.
you laid out, inadvertently or otherwise, Michael Rooker.
Oh, not inadvertently, like intentionally. The chance to brain Rooker was such a joy.
Were you terrified on a personal level?
No, I've been friends with Michael now for a number of years, so getting to be in a movie with him was a joy for me because I think he is so talented. And Michael, when I was back in my using days, as a young man, I was incredibly intoxicated on a substance that was very mind-altering in a way that created a lot of hallucinations. And like an idiot, I sat down to watch many. There's little children over there. I should be quiet. But like, I watched some movies that you should not watch. You should be in a really good state of mind to watch.
Right.
And Henry Portrait of a
Oh,
Serial Killer
no.
really jacked me up hard.
We have a phrase, and we call it the bridge too far.
Yeah.
Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer.
It is
a
that bridge too far.
It is rough, man. But he's so good.
Yeah.
Oh,
He's so incredible.
Brilliant actor.
And it's such an
Brilliant.
amazing piece of visceral, aggressive horror filmmaking that, takes that, in my opinion, like the Hooper tradition to like a 90s indie film vibe.
Yep.
And so working with him was a blast, and getting to kill him was so fun. And and when I first started, in 6th or 7th grade, I didn't want to play baseball anymore, but my mom said I had to do something that summer besides just read comics and mow lawns. So I did a community theater play, and I looked at the program recently because I still have it from this play, and when I grew up, I wanted to be a horror makeup effects artist. I wanted
Sure.
to
Be the
work
next
in.
Tom
So I was a
Savini.
big Fangoria
Yeah.
collector and
Okay,
Rue
right,
Morgan,
yep.
famous monsters of filmland, and being on a show like Belko where they were doing all these great, awesome, practical
Right.
blood gore effects and
Yeah.
stuff was so much freaking fun, man. I loved it.
It's a great
It's a blast.
film. we have a slight difference. of
That's
opinion.
okay. No, it's a divisive film, and I think it's interesting. It's hard for me to talk about things that I worked in, but yeah, it's
And that was all shot in Colombia.
Bogota, Colombia. Yeah.
Okay.
And
how long were you
I
down
was
there
there
for
for like
for the
a
shoot?
week. They were there for like a month, but I was there for a couple of days, and then I had to fly back because Animals, my indie
Right.
film that I had written, was coming out at the same time as the first Ant-Man. So I was having
Okay.
to come back to do the release work for that, and then I flew back for just a last couple days where Melanie Diaz, who's now one of the stars of Charmed on the
Oh,
WB,
right,
she
yeah.
is who kills me
Right.
in Belko. So we had
Right,
to
right.
shoot this scene where a 5'2", 95-pound
Right.
little amazing actor is gonna. I'm a pretty big guy,
Right.
And how we had to make that work ended up being really fun. She shoves my head through a big piece of exposed rebar, and I get a big hole in the back of my cranium.
That must have been fun to do the makeup for that one.
It was. I love it. I love it. I've got some cool pictures, like when I did Bird Box and I get half my face blown off. I didn't want to clean it off at the end of the day. I went home, and my son, who's now 5, he was like 3 at the time.
Oh, no.
I've got a great video of him. He thinks it's so cool. My kids are horror hounds. I'm so proud.
Attaboy.
They're
Bring 'em
5
up.
and 2, and my daughter thinks ghosts are the coolest thing. My son is very into werewolves. He's already annoyed his teachers because every time they have library day, he wants to check out a book on werewolves, and like, you've checked out the 3 books in our library on werewolves now.
Right.
Like, there's no more.
You've tapped out.
Yeah.
Teach the children
I'll donate
well.
that to the-
Teach
yeah.
those children well.
So, I'm kind of curious how you got your first feature film, and according to IMDb, you had something in 2000, but then there was the jump, and you landed The Dark Knight with Christopher Nolan. How did you get into a production like that?
I scratch my head still. I mean, life is about, I think, working the hardest you can at the things that you love, finding a way to like take care of yourself, and like I had finally started taking care of myself. I was working as hard as I could at the thing I loved, which was acting, and collecting. I was still collecting my comics with the little money I was making. I was working as a telemarketer by day and a movie theater usher at night, and then and I was my Chicago shop is a place called Graham Crackers Comics downtown, and I was, just rebuilding a life for myself because I had lived homeless for a while when my addictions had gotten out of hand. And so I was learning how to live, and I missed acting so bad, and I started doing theater basically for free. And that opened doors, which led to me starting to get paid to do theater, which was such a dream for me that I was getting maybe $250 a week, which I couldn't believe, to do like a play, like a stage production. I was over the moon, and then I got to work my way up, and I was doing this really amazing there's an incredible theater, a regional theater in the Chicago area called Writers Theater. I was doing a production of Othello, and it's like a 4-month job. It's good. These are great jobs. You get to really dive in, and you get to do work with amazing artists. And so the week of table work, which was the first week of rehearsal, I get this out of the blue chance to audition for. They're going to do a sequel to the Batman Begins, which I was a huge fan of, and they wouldn't tell us anything about it other than you're a bank robber. So I prepared this scene, which ultimately was the bank heist sequence with the clowns at the top of the film. And I went to the audition. I prepared the living shit out of this thing. I was so excited. I was like, this is for me. I'm the guy who's been collecting these. I know everything about the Joker. I know everything about this world. I'm the guy for this role. So I gave it all I had. The casting director brought me back the next day. I got to sit at a very small table with Christopher Nolan, and I got to do the scene again. And then a few days later, because it's a small town, and as far as actors go, I had heard that they were shooting this bank heist sequence in Chicago, and I was devastated because that was my chance, you know. And I went back to Othello, and we did that show for 4 months. That was April, May, June, July. We closed Othello. I didn't know what my next job was going to be, so I was going to call the movie theater, see if I could go back there, or the telemarketing office. And my agent called and said, hey, they've cast you in the new Batman movie, and you're going to be a thug. We don't think you have any lines. They won't tell us what you're doing, but you're going to get to go be a thug. And I cried. I was so happy. It was my birthday.
Right.
Nice.
Kismet.
I was in my little studio apartment, and I went and I showed up for work, and I had never been given a script. I'd been given a fake script.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I showed up in this cop uniform. I was like, why am I in a cop uniform? Why are they putting blood on my leg? What is happening?
Why am I wearing Rachel Dawes?
Why am I wearing a Rachel Dawes tag? By the way, Maggie Gyllenhaal didn't understand. The plot was so secretive to so many people. She was like, why do you have my name on your name tag? I was like, I don't know. And we started shooting. And all those years of collecting comics and gaining strong opinions about the Joker and what that means, and especially the influence that like the Miller and the Loeb stuff had on me as a reader, and like understanding the psychology of the Joker and the horror of the Joker. I felt lucky because I was able to bring a lot, because we improvised. There's no dialogue much between Aaron and I in the back of that ambulance, which was the first moment that we shot, and I just started to kind of go with it, and the director was so supportive and cool, and it ended up changing my life. You know, that changed my life. That experience changed my life.
Kids, if you're listening, watch horror movies and read comics.
Spend every little penny.
And you will get a one-way ticket to Hollywood. It's happening.
No, you got the better role. You didn't have to wear a mask. That was because the thug sequence at the beginning, you don't get to see any of those actors.
You don't. No, I definitely got. Whereas I was so devastated and sad that I didn't get to be in that scene, it turned out that what was in store for me, and that's a good lesson in life, and I've learned that a lot, because dealing with rejection and dealing with failure and dealing with not getting my way was something that I had to learn how to process and how to allow to fuel. Because you know what I did, and I think my recovery work helped me a lot with that. When I got the news that they were shooting the sequence and I wasn't a part of it, and that I wasn't going to be in my mind, I was now not going to get to be a part of this movie, which I felt I was destined to be a part of. I sat on this train ride to go to one of the last days of table work rehearsal before we got on our feet for Othello. And I gave myself that train ride. It was about a 30-minute train ride to where the theater was. And I gave myself that 30 minutes to be pissed off, to be angry, to be like resentful. And then I said, okay. And when the train stopped and the doors opened, I folded up my newspaper, because I was still reading papers back then, and I threw it in the trash. And then I went to work, and I threw myself into the opportunity that I did have, which was getting to be a part of an incredible ensemble of actors doing one of the best plays ever written, and that was a good lesson for me, because it lit a fuel and a fire under me that has helped me immeasurably, not just with being a creative person or whatever you call what I do, somebody who tries to work in professional storytelling or monetized storytelling, but also
Renaissance
just
man.
as a person.
Renaissance man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
as a werewolf.
So before we get out of here, we do have to ask the question.
The question.
What is, since this is a horror movie podcast, what is your favorite horror
It's the hardest
movie?
question. Yeah,
I know.
it's the hardest. I knew
They're
you
all
guys
my
were going to ask me too.
babies.
I knew you were going to ask me.
They're all my babies.
It's really
I
hard
mean,
for me,
you did
guys.
obviously touch on Universal, Castle,
yeah.
all that. I mean,
Yeah.
Hammer, AIP,
So-
all that. I
so-
mean, that's like, that's the best. But
So the Wolfman and Dracula, but the Universal's original productions of both were and are and continue to be things that I revisit with the most regularity when it comes to like the classic and most influential first stuff.
yep.
And I'm totally gonna skirt the question here because I'm also gonna say, and then TCM was life changing for me.
Yep.
I think that there's nothing like what happens to your body the first time you see
Right.
Yeah,
when you see him come out of that
You
front
curl
door
up. Yeah.
and
Oh.
smack him in the head. Something happened to me. And Audition, the Takashi Miike
Oh,
film, had
God.
a really big effect on me in many regards as a storyteller and like thinking about how pace works well with horror, drama. Why? I love goofy, gory, fun.
Sure.
I'm all in when it comes to children shouldn't play with dead things. We can watch that as many times as you guys want. But something hit me as far as what I want to create the most when I saw a film like that or The Exorcist,
Right.
Yeah.
because I felt like the inherent emotional attachment that we were given to these characters made the horror so much more meaningful in one sense. It was
Yes.
less like I love roller coasters,
Right.
and I think it's fun to make movies that are roller coasters, and I also love long conversations that last late into the night that we never really come to a conclusion about.
Right.
And I think some movies are those.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Audition was like traveling at 20 miles an hour, building up character and empathy, and then just going from 20 to 150, and then it just like, and Mike and I were just.
Do you want
curling up
to
and
do you want to
coming
do the
up with
impersonation? All right, David's is way better than yours.
Yeah.
I got it.
He's a pro.
Yours,
Hey,
was,
guys.
yours was good.
That's how I pay the bills, you know. Give me some butcher wire and let me see your leg there, huh? What do you say, Eric?
So it's a busy schedule for David today.
Yes, indeed.
So I could talk all day.
He's got to get
But-
to see Crematia.
Yeah.
I hope we can do this more too, because
Heck
one of the
yeah.
things, the horror is the gift that keeps giving, and
Yes.
we're living in a wonderful time right now, renaissance of
Oh my-
what's happening with horror cinema,
Yeah,
but
is
also
it
what's
ever.
happening with the horror comic. Like I
Yep.
was collecting Blood of Dracula and Tomb of Dracula and Morbius and Werewolf by Night when I was a kid. Dark Horse Comics, and what they are like, I
They're
think the
doing
gold
it.
standard in like what's happening with
Yes,
horror
indeed.
comics right now, and I am so proud to be a part of that world. But I think that we're just scratching this, like what you've seen in issue 1.
Yep.
Which drops October 23rd in comic shops everywhere. Please be sure to pre-order at your favorite comic shop today. I wanted, because what's fun for me will be getting to come in and talk again. We can meet up and talk about like how the Frankenstein monster mythology influenced a plot line that's going to be happening, as well as so many others. You know,
Heck yes. We
Yes.
would love to have you back at any point, and Crematia too.
Diamond code AUG
There it is.
190245.
Order,
it.
order yours now.
It's going on my pull list.
Or I'll be at your window. Tap, tap, tapping.
All right, thanks, David.
Thanks, you
We
guys.
really
This was
appreciate that.
monstrously fun.
Oh my gosh, this is
and
a
I
highlight
had a
for us
blast.
for sure.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy Portland. Enjoy the rest of the con. And
Thanks.
And say hi to Crematia.
I will.